President Trump's speech wasn't the only thing to make stocks surge this week. Stocks reacting big time when our own Neil Cavuto asked Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin about tax reform.
Our objective is to pass tax reform by the August recess, and I think that's a very aggressive timetable, but realistic and something that the President and I are very committed to doing.
So by August, voted, done, agreed.
And signed.
Signed, sealed, and delivered. There you go. And after that interview aired on Fox Business, guess what? We took one big leg up in the markets. The Secretary says it'll all be done by Labor Day. But is the market making too big a bet on that promise?
To our Fox Business All-Stars, Charles Payne and Dagen McDowell. Well, we just had Paul Schatz tell us Labor Day, 23,000 on the S&P. Are we going to see Labor Day tax reform?
I think, you know what, I wish they would say tax cuts separate from tax reform. Ronald Reagan did tax cuts relatively quickly, and then the arduous task of tax reform. We always talk about how big the tax code is. I guess if you printed it out in single page, you know, it'd be taller than Shaquille O'Neal. So the idea we're going to tackle that and rejigger that whole thing, I don't know that Wall Street even cares as much as get the regulations out of the way as soon as you can, because that's low-hanging fruit, and lower the rates immediately. That's what I think is important.
Big bets have been placed on the deregulation, removal of all the record number of economically significant rules that President Obama put in place, because you've seen the Russell 2000 also hitting a new all-time high. It's those small businesses that are hit hardest by all this overregulation. But the line is in the sand. August is a tough timeline that Congress is working with. I still think that they will end up cutting taxes, making them retroactive to January the 1st, and then dealing with tax reform, particularly on the business side, because with that border adjustment tax, there are so many Republicans who are not on board with that.
Yeah, no, you're right, and understandably so. I mean, you look at the border adjustment tax, and there's real concern about the retail industry, and what I mean, we got retailers, right, that are struggling at it is, and they're big employers.
Gas prices go up immediately if they put that in place, and oil prices go up immediately. Try running for re-election on that if you're a politician.
Yeah, no, so
well, the
repatriation
has to be part of, whether you call it tax reform or tax cuts. As every guest on the show has talked about for the last month, the S&P reflects repatriation, so it better be part of the initial rollout in terms of bringing that money back.
And I think it will be, but the idea is what's the agreement? In other words, when George Bush did it, you know, there was evidence that a lot of money came back, and of course some will go to buyback, some will go to other things, but a large part of it will go to refunding this economy without costing the taxpayers anything.
But it didn't do that the way they had wanted and intended last time around, and it wasn't the concern that it was in part because it was a one-time holiday.
Well, they do a one-time holiday, I think, to create that sense of urgency. But to your point, when I interviewed then candidate Trump, I said, why don't you guys just drop it? You know, if the argument is that every country in the world has a bad tax, so we should, the counter-argument could be, hey, every country in the world does not have a repatriation tax. Why? Is there anyone watching this show that wants to pay taxes twice? Yeah. It doesn't make sense. It's nuts. Let them bring the money back. It's easy.
Let it, you know, and invest it here. I hear you. Do you think, though, I mean, again, back to this timetable, because I think the market's dependent on it, and I love the idea of 23,000. I hope Paul Schatz is right. I hope it happens by Labor Day. But the only way that's even really, I think, possible is if they come through with something, Dagen.
Well, I saw a line buried in a newspaper article earlier this week, and it was one of the very last sentences in quite a long article, and it said many in Congress are talking about 2018 for a tax overhaul. So what they're saying behind closed doors down in Washington, D.C., ultimately that's going to filter through to a market that is priced to perfection at this point.
Charles, I want to ask you something about the markets, because you know I respect you as an investor in a great way. The cheapest asset out there right now is protection, the VIX, volatility. We talked about how volatility is non-existent. And while the asset to buy it is expensive, if you buy the VXS ETF right now, you're paying a lot of money. When the S&P was at 666 in 2009, everybody was buying insurance. It was going to go to 300. Right. 2,400, nobody is buying insurance. Do you like the idea of buying the VXX right now?
I would make it a very small portion of my portfolio, because I think the notion of trying to pinpoint a top could be folly. And to the idea that we're priced for protection, let's remember we're at the tail end of earnings season. What did we learn this earnings season? 9 of 11 sectors have said that growth has accelerated since December 31st of last year. We've got some pretty good beats. We've got some pretty good guidance. And I'm listening to companies like Toll Brothers, what management said from Toll Brothers, what management said from a company called Mastech, an infrastructure company out of Coral Gables, Florida. If you listen to what these companies are telling you, you can argue that this rally can continue for a long time based on, here's the irony, on the things that are supposed to happen when we trigger the Trump agenda. They're already beginning to happen. So, yeah, we want them to come up.
That's how optimism works, that people become more optimistic about the economy, and it actually lifts the economy because they act on their own feeling. Yep. A better feeling about the direction.
Well, that is the animal spirits actually becoming orders on the books and capital spending.
Right.
Dagen, Charles, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Okay.